All right. Hello, my friends. We are live, and today we're here to talk about 3 strategies you can use to start uncovering those hidden gems in your donor base. So, welcome. As folks are coming in, I'm going to introduce myself. If we haven't met yet, my name is 𝗙𝗿𝗄𝗄, and I help fundraising teams develop the skills, strategies, and systems that they need to raise more major gifts. So, as we get started, if this is your first time joining me, I would love to hear from you. One of the things I love about these live interactive sessions is the fact that we can interact in real time. So you can go ahead and drop your questions into the comments. And to start us off, what I would love to hear is who you are and where you're joining us from today. So go ahead, drop that in the comments. Let us know where you're joining us from. And welcome. If you're catching up on the replay, which I know a lot of you do, if you're not able to join us live, go ahead and use the hashtag replay when you comment, because I always come back and check out the comments for your questions and answer those even after we're live. So welcome. Go ahead, let me know where you're joining from. And while you do that, I'm going to go ahead and give a little context for our session together today. So one of the reasons why I put this together is because I see a big mistake that a lot of nonprofits are making when they're starting to think about growing their major gifts. What's often happening is most fundraisers are looking for gifts in all of the wrong places. What do I mean by that? What happens often is that we're taught as fundraisers ultimately to go outside of the organization and really be looking for those elusive mega donors that can often be really difficult to connect with. And that is a mistake that can end up leaving millions of dollars on the table. This is a mistake that costs us. So I want to go ahead and dive into my strategies and talk a little bit more about exactly how you address this. And if you're just joining us live, go ahead, let me know where you're joining from. And oh, great, I'm seeing the comments now. My comments are a bit slow today. Hello, Janet, joining us from Winnipeg, Treaty 1, Manitoba. Welcome. And go ahead as you're joining. I think the internet might be a bit sluggish. I'm hoping you're able to see and hear me okay. And as you come, go ahead and let us know where you are joining us from, and diving right into our strategies to help you uncover those hidden gems in your donor base. All right. So strategy number 1, I really want to encourage you to start with those who have already said yes. Chances are you have donors in your donor base who are ready, willing, and able to make a much more significant gift than you expect. Because a lot of donors with significant capacity will actually start out by testing the organization to see what the experience is with a smaller gift, right? This is an interesting insight. So that's why the most strategic place to start with filling your major gift pipeline is right in your own backyard, and that is in your existing donor base. Now, chances are, if you're a medium or larger organization, you already have a pretty significant individual giving base. And in that giving base, there are folks who are ready and interested to make a more significant investment in your important work. Right? So I had a big aha moment about this myself, probably about 15 years ago, when I had the opportunity to meet a very generous longtime donor who had been giving $75 a year to our organization. Every year, like clockwork, she was very loyal, and she would send in $75 in response to our annual holiday appeal. I bet you this sounds a little familiar. So what happened was we actually opened up and sent an open house invitation to many of our most loyal, longtime dedicated donors. And she ended up coming and connecting, and we were able to meet her and speak with her about why the work we were doing was so important to her, and how we could work together to really, really create that impact and that change that she wanted to see in the world. So ultimately, over the course of several years of this relationship building, not only did she commit to leaving a gift in her will, but she also ended up leaving a $250,000 gift because she wanted to see the impact of her giving in her lifetime. So $75 a year to $250,000, pretty significant. Now, you may think that this is a bit of a fluke or a unicorn story, but it's so interesting whenever I share that aha moment that I had personally. What I tend to hear back from a lot of fundraisers that they've had a similar experience, right? Everyone has a story of the donor who surprised you with a much more significant gift than you were expecting. So this, I would say, is not an exception. I'll say this is actually the rule. It's just such a common thing that I hear often from donors. So if you are just joining us and catching up, I always like to give you the opportunity to interact, share your wisdom with our room here, because that's so, so valuable. So I would love to hear from you. If you have ever had that experience of having a gift come in from a donor that maybe has been loyal, giving to you for a few years, that was just an absolute surprise. Maybe it was a big jump in amount, and you just weren't anticipating a donor giving a gift of that size based on their giving history. I want to hear from you if you've got a good story about that, because I think that can be super helpful in terms of inspiring other folks and inspiring other fundraisers. So go ahead, let me know if you've got a good story like this below. And what I'm going to do while you do that is touch on an important reframing, I think, that will enable us to find those hidden gems, like the $75 holiday gift donor that ended up being a $250,000 gift donor, and ultimately a very significant bequest pledger as well. So a reframe I think that we have to do is start looking as fundraisers beyond our limiting labels, okay? So if you've been following me for a while, you may have heard me share one of my favorite mottos, and that is, there is no such thing as a big or a small donor. There's no such thing as a big or a small donor, right? So what do I mean by that? Big and small are simply arbitrary labels that we're applying to our donors, and we often do this after one single initial interaction with the organization, right? This may sound familiar. Now, don't get me wrong, I'm definitely an advocate of, using donor segmentation strategically, but too often what we do is we end up creating real restrictions when we indelibly label donors based on their first interaction with the organization, right? So why does this matter so much? It does connect back to this idea, if you're starting that search for mega donors outside your organization, that you're going to be overlooking those hidden gems right in your existing donor base or in your supporter community, right? Because, that's the moment when we end up leaving potentially millions of dollars on the table. So I shared with you an example, of the $75,000 to $250,000 $75,000 to $250,000 donor. Other examples I've heard include, and I'm just going to do a quick refresh here. Other examples I've heard include, for example, a donor who initially connected with the organization with a $50 membership, and subsequently, again, over many years of careful relationship building, ended up leaving a significant multi-million-dollar, $8 million gift to this organization in their will. So I think this is really relevant, and I think that this, again, is, I would say, not the exception, it's the rule. So we really need to be thinking about and looking at those donors in our donor base and do a bit of a reframe and stop thinking about our donors as big or small. So now I want to hear from you I'm not sure my comments are showing up, so I will apologize in advance if you are commenting and I'm not responding. But I'm gonna keep going, and I'm gonna ask. I want to hear from you. I want to hear from you as well. Is this something you're seeing happening at your organization? Is there an inflexible labeling of donors, because this would be very common, based on a first interaction with your organization? So I want to hear from you. Go ahead and type yes into the comments if you are experiencing this in your organization. And it may seem like something that's really difficult to shift if you are at a medium or a large organization. But I'm going to give you some practical tips now in terms of some of the tactics that you can use to address this in your organization. So go ahead and drop yes into the comments. Even if I can't see it in my live stream studio, I'm going to come back to you and respond in LinkedIn. All right, so I want to share with you, I've shared a couple of ideas that I'm hoping will help you reframe your thinking, because I think that's the important first step, is to recognize where opportunities may be missed, and to start reframe how we're thinking about major donors and how we're thinking about potential major gift prospects. And now what I'm going to do is share with you a little bit more in terms of the tactics that you can use. All right, the practical, tactical, as I like to call it, in terms of how to actually take action to uncover these hidden gems in your donor base. So there are a couple things I think you can start with in terms of what to look for. I like to recommend first that you start with looking for donors who are giving larger than average donations, right? So depending on the size of your shop, this could be a huge range, right? It could be $1,000, it could be $5,000, it could be, you know, $500 or even $250. But starting with that frame to start playing with the data and testing your hypothesis and having a look at who are those donors who are giving a larger than average gift. Let's have a look at who those are and see if we're seeing any patterns there. So that's one thing and one great place to start. I think that's especially helpful if it is a little bit overwhelming to think about the volume of donors that you're dealing with. That might be the most typical question that I will get when I am talking about this idea of there not being such a thing as a big or small donor. And the fact that many donors will start by testing your organization with a small gift, donors who in fact have significant capacity to give a 7-figure gift and beyond. So folks sometimes feel a bit overwhelmed by this. So, okay, where do we start? If this is in fact possible and there is potential here, and we've got this huge volume of donors, it's like, how do we get started with this? So that would be my first kind of practical tip in terms of how you're looking at the data. Start with those donors who are giving a larger than average gift for you as an organization. And don't overthink this. I like to often think about it as being in a bit of like a, being in a bit of like a data laboratory, right? Let's have a look. Let's pull this, see what happens. What are we seeing? We're recognizing any patterns here that might be useful to us in terms of identifying those donors who may have greater capacity. So that's part one place I often recommend that folks start. The second place that I recommend that you start is looking at longtime donors with significant giving, looking for longtime donors that have a significant cumulative lifetime giving history. So I will share with you the way we ultimately ended up, which I had previously mentioned, meeting our $75,000 to $250,000 donor, was that we invited a key segment of our donors to an open house. And that key segment was ultimately not actually even based on amount, it was based on length of giving. So we were looking at those donors who, let's see, who's been giving to us for a long time? How do we want to connect with them? Doesn't necessarily have to be a big organized thing. Perhaps it's just even a phone call. But looking at those loyal, longtime donors and having a look at their cumulative giving history is something that's so often overlooked at every size shop. So I really recommend that you do that. Whether you're small, medium, large, or very large, that can be a place that there are a lot of hidden gems in your donor base. right? So there are very generous supporters that might ultimately be flying under your radar. And these are two very simple tips that I have for you for getting started in terms of finding them. I am just very briefly going to open up see what's going on here. All right. Just want to make sure I'm not missing anything. I do seem to have a bit of a technical issue. My apologies. If you are commenting, I'm not seeing it, but I will come back to that. I'm going to go ahead and continue with wrapping up. Just sometimes it's one of those days. sometimes the tech doesn't cooperate with us. So I'm going to go ahead and wrap up and come back, check your comments, and have a look at what you have to say when you're catching up on the replay. If you were trying to join us live and you've had technical difficulties, I apologize in advance. I hope you found this helpful. So what we've talked about today is some strategies that you can use to help start uncover those hidden gems in your donor base, how to avoid the really common mistake that a lot of organizations make by skipping over those folks who are already saying yes to your organization, who have significant capacity, and starting your looking for major gift prospects by chasing down those elusive mega donors. We want to help you avoid that mistake that's leaving millions of dollars on the table. And we talked also about this idea of how do we reframe our thinking about donors and what are the downsides of applying those indelible labels of big and small, and how we may ultimately be overlooking folks who have significant capacity to give, who are testing our organization with smaller gifts. And finally, we talked a little bit more about some of the strategies that we can use in terms of actually starting to be practical about slicing and dicing that data so that you can begin to do a little bit of work in your data lab to start identifying those folks who may, in fact, have greater capacity, greater inclination, and be ready, willing, and waiting to give you a major gift. So I hope you found this helpful. I think this can have a huge impact on your major gift fundraising strategy. And I want to also share with you an opportunity to dive deeper into these strategies. I have a guide that you can download here, blueskyphilanthropy.com/guide. And this guide is called Fill Your Fundraising Pipeline. It covers off some of the strategies that I talked about today and dives even deeper in terms of looking at some of the ways that you can look at your data. Also sharing with you some of the most frequently overlooked and underutilized metrics that are really important for you to start measuring in your organization when it comes to building a healthier pipeline and starting to uncover some of those hidden gems in your organization. All right, my friends, I do these sessions live every month, and it's always an opportunity for us to connect, for you to bring your questions. If you have shared with me a question, I'm going to go ahead and come back and answer those in the comments. And thank you for your patience on that front. And with that, I will wrap up. I will see you again next month. And we'll look forward to having the opportunity to connect with you and answer all the questions that you have about growing your major gift fundraising. All right, my friends, we'll talk soon.